Especially with mothering, there is this illusion that we should all love it, that it should be the most rewarding thing that we do. We instantly bond and connect with our children, and that's not the case for everybody. Mothering is one of the most stressful, intense things you ever do. I work with a lot of mothers and I remind them, you are in survival right now and you are really the servant to this little person, and it's okay to not like that.
I don't know anyone that when your name is mentioned, they're like, oh, I just love Lael.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Well, I think that you've just been so giving with information, and you've become such an authority in helping us to not just be better parents, but actually how we can reflect and be better humans ourselves. But I was thinking about this. So you're the creator of About Birth, which was where I first met you. Olivia's 17, so there's that. So it's been 17 years.
Wow, okay.
And then the last time we had you on the podcast was when you had just opened Woodland Primary. So that was, it's primary, yeah?
Yeah, Woodland Primary, yep.
Now here we are. It's been a bit of a journey.
It has been a journey. And people always say to me, like, you know, where have you come from? What have you done? And I look at that trajectory of starting at birth, then moving into parenting with little kids, and then moving into working with teenagers, and then a school. And now I think I'm finally at that point where it really is all about the adult and how we understand ourselves more, so we can, you know, we can be better in all those other aspects as well. So I feel very, very lucky that I've had a long career kind of spanning the journey of what it is to be a human, actually. It's beautiful.
Given the timeline, a lot of this, I would imagine, has been through living your experience and then being able to teach, which I think is fantastic. I was talking about this the other day. I'm at a point where the majority of people that tune into anything that we do are 35 and over. Whilst we've helped women through perimenopause and menopause for years, it's not until you're actually in it that you can add another layer.
So true, so true.
Adding that layer, I think, is probably part of what you've been able to do.
I mean, I started working in birth because I'd had a really tricky birth experience, and then I had an amazing one, and then I was like, I want others to know this. So that I kind of, you know, got into that because of my kids, and then as they grew, I wanted to really figure out, how do I be the most conscious parent I can be? And then when they moved into the teenage years and I was totally freaked out about sex and relationships and all that stuff, I kind of threw myself into that. So I feel very, very blessed that my growth has been a lot to do with my children, and also my curiosity around how do I do this with the most awareness possible? I think that's what's always driven me.
I think that most of us at some point think we're doing it wrong. Like, no one's looking at what we're doing right.
Yeah.
We're constantly thinking, where have I stuffed up? Where haven't I been enough? What haven't I done? What do you say to the people that are listening feeling like that? Not that we've actually talked about any strategies, but when you hear the word parenting expert, I think you already go, oh, well,
I've done it wrong.
Too late.
Yeah, totally. I remember feeling actually like that when my kids were little, when I really didn't have a grip on it and I was really struggling. And I remember having this feeling of despair of like, oh, I'm going to mess it up. So what's the point? And I remember sitting at that point thinking, I've got to strive for more than that, right? Because these are an incredible thing in front of me, these beautiful little humans, and there is a incredible opportunity for growth here for myself. But coming back to that place, I think we're so hardwired to be critical about ourselves from our own childhoods mainly. You know, I think that inner harsh voice, that criticism that we often carry, I mean, parenting is just the perfect hotspot for it, because the moment you get pregnant, you know, you are bombarded with, you should do it this way or that way, or this is how it should look, and you should feed your kids this thing, and they should go to this school. And there is just so much information that just makes you feel bad about yourself around the choices. And it's, for me, so much about parenting is learning to trust our intuition and learning to tune into ourselves to say, what is right for me and this little person in front of me? And yet what we do is we are so overloaded with so much information that I think then we take it on board and go, I'm getting it wrong, I'm messing it up. Whereas what's really interesting is some of the research and data has said that if you are getting it right 30% of the time, then you're doing really well. Now, it depends what that 30% looks like, right? And depends, you know, I think a lot on what we think right or wrong is. But I come back to saying to parents all the time, you know, if you are able to get down on your kids' level if you play and connect, if you can listen to their feelings, if you are creating safety in your home, then you are doing an incredible job. So I think we all have to take our foot off there's a perfect parent, because there's not. We're all going to mess up. Our kids are all going to have stuff. But the most we can really do, I think, a lot of the time is just turning up with a level of awareness and connection for our kids, and we're doing okay.
One of the number one questions I get asked, and I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask you anyway, is how do I make my children do what, especially as they get older, how do I make them do what I want them to do?
Yeah. If kids were just born compliant, it would be amazing. Parenting, I think, would be a breeze. But our kids come in with this energy of like, hey, I'm here firstly to be my authentic self, which is ideally what we want them to be. And secondly, I'm here to shine a mirror on all your unresolved crap that you haven't dealt with. So I am going to push back on things to help activate all the learning and growth that you have to do. So, I think the first thing we have to do when we're looking at how do I get my kids to do what we want them to do is we actually just have to take the pressure off of that's not the goal. The goal is not to raise compliant kids. And I say this, and I think people get a bit funny about it, but the goal is not to raise good boys and good girls, because when we do that, we are raising children that are often abandoning what their truth is, their voice, their yeses and nos to please someone else. Now, we do also have to raise kids that can function in the world and can be a contributing part of society. So there's a balance in there somewhere, but the goal is not to get kids to be compliant, because when we do that, really what we're saying is, we know what's best for you. So what do? Well, we come back to understanding that what helps children to behave, agree, contribute, all those kind of things, or to get them to do what we want them to do is really based around connection. So when a child feels connected to you, when they feel that you love and accept them, when they're feeling good in their bodies, they are much more willing to do what we ask them to do. Whereas if we have a child that is pretty out of balance, they've got a big backpack of feelings going on, a whole lot of stresses, or maybe there's trauma there, it's often very, very hard for them to cooperate and for them to do the things we want them to do. Because it's pretty understandable. A 7-year-old, we're like, come on, we're going to the dentist. 7-year-old doesn't want to go to the dentist. 7-year-old wants to still keep playing with their trains and their trucks and building Lego and all those kind of things. Often in children's lives, there's a lot of things they have to do that they don't want to do. And I mean, that's the same as us as adults. We don't sometimes want to go to work, or we don't want to make dinner, but we do it because that's what we're doing. And we have the maturity and the understanding to know that there's sometimes things we have to do that we don't want to do. But our kids are still really learning about that. And so, for me, I sit in a place where it's not about coercing or bribing them to do it. It's about finding enough connection with them so that then they are willing to do it. And I think the other piece of that is it's so much about knowing the child in front of you. So you are going to have some kids that are pretty robust, resilient, they just get on with it and do things. Then you're going to have other kids that are going to need you to hold their hand to do something, right? So I look at my 3 kids, my youngest is very independent, just gets on with it, does stuff. Even as a 3 or 4-year-old, she'd walk into the kitchen and go, oh, this place is a mess, and she'd start cleaning up. And I was like, oh my God, it took me 3 kids, but one of them valued that. Whereas my middle child, if she takes a lot more support to get her to do stuff. So if I was like, come on, we're going to clean up your room, I'd probably need to be there beside her, chatting to her, and then she'd actually do it. Left alone to her devices when she was younger, nothing would get done. And I think it's about knowing who your child is. And sometimes some of them need a bit more scaffolding. Sometimes some of them are just happy to get on and do it. Sometimes some of them really need a lot of connection before we can get them to move on. So in an ideal world, if kids would just do what we wanted, I think parenting would be a breeze, but it doesn't work like that. And I think we have to come back to understanding that for me, connection is always the first point we have to go to when we're wanting cooperation.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that I can see where in my parenting path where the connection actually kicked in. I don't feel like I was connected to my children when they were little.
Yeah.
I felt like, you go through the motions. Yes, they're fed. Yes, they're, bathed. They're going to school. And then there was this point where I remember thinking, and I want to say they were about 7 or 8, maybe 9, and I was like, oh, now I like it. And upon reflection, I really didn't like those early years. I don't know that I did the best job. We do what we can, but it made me, at some point, there was a turning point where I was, and I think I've said this to you in the past, determined that the teen years were going to be delightful.
Yeah.
And I think maybe because I'm defiant and everyone was telling me that they were going to be terrible. So maybe that was externally what was happening to motivate my personality, that you can't tell me what to do. But there was definitely a point where I'm like, I love taking you to basketball. I love picking you up from school. I love the conversations we're having.
Yeah.
There was a time where that wasn't there. I mean, I was thinking about this in the car, and I said to you before, I'm a bit emotional today, and I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to cry in my own podcast? I'm not. I think recognizing that is okay.
Yeah, totally, it's okay.
And it's never too late to actually start to realize what might need to be added.
I love what you're saying there, Nat, because especially with mothering, like, and fathering's a bit of a different thing, but especially with mothering, there is this illusion that we should all love it, that it should be the most rewarding thing that we do, that we instantly bond and connect with our children. And that's not the case for everybody. And I think we have to come back to going, mothering is one of the most stressful, intense things you ever do, and particularly when our children are little, for me, I work with a lot of mothers and I remind them, you are in survival right now, because either you've just given birth, you're feeding a baby from your body, maybe you don't have the support that you need, and you are really the servant to this little person. And it's okay to not like that, right? Especially if you have had a life before that where you were recognized for what you do, the way you look, the contributions that you have to society. Mothering can be very, very invisible. And, that can be a real shock to the system. And, it can feel relentless every day. We're doing the same thing. And so it's really understandable that for some women, they're like, this sucks, I don't like it. And that's okay. And we don't really talk about that. And I think it's an important thing to be able to say there are going to be times where we love this and there's going to be times when we don't. Now, I've been a mum for 25 years now, and, there were definitely stages where I was like, yeah, this is amazing. I mean, I love newborns. Give me a newborn any day. I'm like, that's my magic place. The toddler years, I'm like, they're relentless, man. You don't get to sit down again. It's often all about big feelings. It's really, really big. And then you kind of get this sweet spot between about 6 to 11 where it feels pretty gorgeous, where they're a bit more independent. They can get out of the car by themselves, make themselves a snack. That often feels a little bit easier. And then the tween and the teen years come, and then there's a whole other level of intensity that sometimes comes in that phase, which has usually got a lot more to do about just the emotional stuff, our own teenage years, all those kind of things. So I think for every person, it is so understandable to know that we can ebb and flow in that, and that there's times where we're going to be like, I really dig this and this feels amazing. And then there's going to be times where we're like, don't know, why do we do this? This is hard. And I know every parent loves their child. Every parent would, does whatever they can, because we love our children. But I think there's a human aspect that we're allowed to talk about that says that it's not always rosy, and there's times where I don't really love it and enjoy it. And that can be with our kids as well. There's times where sometimes we feel different about our children. We might feel deeply connected to one child and another one's going through something tricky, and that may be pushing all our buttons, and that feels very challenging. And that's okay to feel like that, So I think we have to remember that we are human, we ebb and flow, and, that this kind of career of parenting is designed, I think, to push up a lot of our own stuff and help us grow.
I think that's so true, the pushing up of our own stuff. I loathed primary school.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I found it really hard parenting my children. Yeah. And I loved high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I'm like, the hard part, I feel like the hard part's done. But the emotions also of things that would occur with the children, friend dramas or whatever it might have been that would come up, re-feeling those feelings.
Yeah, that's
a lot.
And that's what you're talking about is, I think, the juice of most of my work is that our children are these beautiful little mirrors, and when we start to have reactions and we've got a lot of feelings brewing around what's happening in their world, a lot of the time it is connected to the own healing that we need to do for ourselves. Because I've heard it time and time again, if a child is having friendship issues at school and a parent comes to me and they're really worried about it, one of the questions I'll always ask is, what was friendships like for you at school? And then everyone's like, oh God, I got excluded, or someone bullied me, or my friendships were so vague all the time and I didn't know where I stood. And there's still a lot of pain there. And I think, our children come along and they're like, hey, I need to be the best version of myself. And in order to do that, I need to not carry your baggage. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mirror back to you what's yours to work with. And if we are aware enough and we can see that and feel it and we can kind of look at our own healing in that way, then what often happens is what's going on with the child will often shift because we're kind of doing our inner work and the child's like, oh, good, you got that bit, and then they move on.
How do we make sure that we're not putting our own experiences, previous experiences or fears or whatever onto our children? Is there something that we can do as parents?
Such a great question. So I think the thing is I always come back to if you are having a reaction and a feeling, then it's about you. So we know when we're centered, right? I think we've all got a barometer of when we feel pretty grounded, pretty anchored, pretty in our adult self, right? So when we are trying to control something, when we're getting really, really stressed about something with our children, when we're continually going over something, that might be a bit of a sign that we're like, is this about me or is this about my child? And usually I come back to if you are getting reactive, you've got feelings going on, then that is a really good indication that perhaps you need to pause and talk to someone or see what's there around what might be brewing for you. I mean, there's been plenty of times in my kids' journey where there's stuff that just comes out of left field that you don't even realize. Like I remember one time my son didn't get picked in this soccer team and he was playing a really high level of soccer and doing really well, and they had trials and he didn't get picked. And he was kind of okay with it, right? I think he was maybe 15 or 16 at the time. But I was not okay with it. All of a sudden I was like, the coach has picked his son and his son isn't very good. And I'm like getting right up in
I think a lot of us
my
can relate to
stuff
this.
of just like, he deserves a check. And I was getting fired up. And even my husband's looking at me like, I'm not really a competitive person, but he's like, what is happening here in this scenario? And I felt such of injustice, right? And I had to check myself because I was like, there's something big here for me because I'm over the top. Like my son's looking at me like, settle down, mum. Like I'm good with this. And then when I kind of sat with it, I was like, what is this feeling here? What does this remind me of? And what it reminded me of is when I was 14 and I didn't get picked in the dance squad. And I was so devastated and I was so embarrassed and I felt all this shame because I didn't get picked. And then I'm watching my son who actually was kind of all right with it, but that moment activated that feeling in me. And I realized that, this is mine. He's actually okay in this moment, but I am having a reaction to what is happening here. That can happen in many aspects of our kids' lives. It's when maybe they get excluded from a friendship group. Maybe it's when they're having trouble learning at school and maybe you had troubles learning. Perhaps it's going through puberty because that's just such a huge thing and was often painful for a lot of people. Watching our children become sexualized beings can feel really confronting as a parent, because it can bring up all our own stuff and shame around that time in our lives. So I just think there is so much gold for us to work through our stuff through the vision of that lens of our children.
Yesterday I put on Instagram that I told a story, and I'll tell it again for those that didn't see the story yesterday, but I was having a conversation with Jess, my business partner for Embody, and I was saying how I felt a bit flat and I was trying to figure out, why do I feel a bit ho-hum. And then I was like, okay, this time last year we were in Europe with the kids. We had the best holiday. And, of course, holidays are really where we make a lot of core memories for kids or for families, anyone. It doesn't matter who you really go on a holiday with. I think you can pinpoint any time that you've gone on a holiday and it's been great. But I was reflecting on all of that, and Jess's children are younger, 10 and under. She said to me, it's okay, you can just go next year. And I'm like, well, firstly, not really. Livy's in year 12 next year. Like we could, but it won't be the same. There's a lot more pressure next year. It's just not going to feel the same. I hung up the phone and I couldn't shake what was in my mind for about 24 hours. And it was when your children are 10 and under, maybe around that age, whatever, it's not even a number, you've got many more summers, probably another 8 at least. But we're at a point where there's not many more summers. And I know that it's just a season. I love summer too, so it's like my favorite time of year. But it really made me stop and go, I don't have many more years in the same, of course there's more years, but in this same environment where my children are at home, they're still at high school, you're still kind of the go-to person. Like I don't have many more of those. And it just played on my mind for a whole day. And I told this story on Instagram, the amount of women that reached out. It was so funny because the minute someone would send me this reply that I'd be crying. And then the next one was like, don't worry, if you're paying for the holiday, they're always going to come. It was like this mix of joy and sadness. You can't know that feeling. You cannot. Everyone tells you it goes so quickly, cherish the moments. When they're 8 and they're having a tantrum and you don't know how to regulate it and it's all happening, you're like, this is never going to end. But once you get to those later teen years, it really all starts to kick in.
It does. It goes so fast too. And you see this beautiful little human that you created who's becoming themselves. Like there is so much magic and beauty in witnessing their evolution of who they are. And at the same time, there's that deep sadness, isn't there, that like this is going quickly and it keeps changing. I mean, I'm in this phase of my life where all 3 of my adult kids are still living at home. It's a bit like a share house at the moment, but a bit cleaner than a standard share house, which is beautiful. But I am so hyper aware that that's about to end because 2 of them are about to go traveling again. I mean, they've all traveled and come back and done their bits and pieces. Yeah. But this is really probably the end part. And so I'm really savouring having them here while I can. And yet there's also a part of me that is probably ready for them to go now because I'm like, we've done that really beautiful big piece. And it really is such a beautiful reminder to be present in that moment, to really cherish who they are and right in front of you. I mean, and I find it such a delight. And I love how you talk about teenagers that you're like, it can be amazing because it can be. That's always a big thing that I've said.
I have loved
those teenage years
I'm not out
beautiful.
of it, but I just have absolutely relished in it. And I keep trying to find ways to, what else can we, like how else? Yes.
Love that.
I wish I had have thought about this earlier, I guess.
I love that because I think our society often says, oh, you wait till they become teenagers. And yes, there's challenges, but gosh, teenagers are so funny and they are so full of insights if you can feel, if they feel safe enough to share with what's going on for them. I just love teenagers so much. And I also really love witnessing my children now as adults because who they are, the choices they're making, even their partners, boyfriends, girlfriends, all that kind of stuff is so beautiful to watch. So I think there is so much magic in all the different stages of parenting, but I so relate to the grief or just the nostalgia we can have when we realize how quickly it goes by. It's quite amazing.
And I think maybe for me also it's that I left home when I was really really young. And I probably now upon reflection, I'm like, that my parents would have been devastated. Yeah. And you have absolutely no idea. Yeah. No idea.
Until you're there.
And maybe that's part of the reason why there's that feeling underlying there.
Yeah, totally. I was the same as you. I left to go overseas when I was 17 on my own for 2 years. And that was way before there was any like Skype or Zoom calls. I had to write a letter every day to my parents. I was over the other side of the world, and once a month I'd make a reverse charges phone call just to say, hi, I'm still alive. Like, and I look back and think, God, my
we were tough though.
Would have just had to go.
We had to be tough, right? You just had to be.
Yeah.
There was no constantly having connection to.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
So we've got, we've got that advantage.
Well, we do. I mean, my daughter went to Thailand by herself a few weeks ago. She's 17, and that was the first time she's doing an international flight on her own. And I'm like talking her through this and then message me when you get to Singapore, like all this kind of stuff. And she was great. Like she loved it. And she's like, Mum, I'm ready to travel now. And part of me's like, okay.
No, you're not.
You're about to you're about to go. And then I thought to myself, at this age, you are halfway around the world with no contact. It's going to be okay. It's going to really help her thrive and grow up. And, part of it is us coming to terms with that letting go again. It's letting go and trusting their journey. And I mean, that is parenting in a nutshell, right? From the moment these beautiful babies come out of us, we are invited to trust and let go, for their journey.
You've written a new book that's about to come out or will be out by the time this podcast airs, Own Your Story, for those that are on YouTube watching. There you go. Tell me about the motivation behind this book.
It kind of goes back to actually when COVID first started. So when COVID started and everyone was freaking out about what's going to happen in the world, I was working mainly as a therapist one-on-one with people, and then that was kind of off the cards. And then, in those first month or two when everyone was freaking out and people had to be at home with their kids and no one was coping, right? People are like, what is this? I had so many distress calls from parents just like, whoa, this is really intense. It's full on. And, it was a bit alarming that having to spend so much time with their children was very, very distressing. And I could see how much help was needed there. So I quickly put together this online course thinking, how can I reach more people to help them, unpack a bit of what's going on, their reactions? Because a lot of my work was always about giving parents tools for how to get kids to cooperate or listen to their feelings. But really, so much of parenting is our own reactions and the responses that pop up for us. So I put together this course, and then a few people, people signed up, they did it was great. And then just more and more people wanted it. So then I just kept running these 8-week courses. And what I found as I was working with parents is the same themes kept popping up again and again and again and again. And it wasn't so much about what do I do when my child has a meltdown, but it was really about what are the imprints that I received as a child and how are they turning up in the way that I parent. So I began to just really see that we can do all the correct things like, listen to our kids' feelings and try and be playful and all that kind of stuff. But if you haven't dealt with your own childhood and if you haven't dealt with your own imprints, often what will happen is we will just default to what was done to us. So that was really the motivation for this book. And it's not a parenting book, it's for anybody because we've all been children. And really the essence of the book is taking a look at the imprints and stories that shape who we are. And a lot of the time we are deeply even unaware of what those imprints and stories are. So I talk about imprints as it's a belief system or a story we take on board as children. So we have imprints around everything. So one imprint could be about food, for example. So maybe you grew up in a family where food was a source of celebration. So everyone came together, you shared a meal. It's something that is about family. It is about celebration. You have a really beautiful imprint around joy with it. Other people may have grown up in a family where you had to eat everything on your plate. You had no choice and say over what was given to you. And they may have a story around food that feels really, really challenging. We all have an imprint around relationships and intimacy because we will have watched our parents or parent interact with others. So if we grew up in a family where our parents, their way of communicating was yelling at each other, we think that's very normal. And then we grow up to become adults and then we get into a relationship and we start yelling at our partner and they're like, why are you yelling at me? And you're like, well, because this is how we show love. And then when they are not yelling back, you're like, well, maybe you don't love me. And, you can begin to see that that's an imprint you have. We have imprints around money, around success, around feelings and emotions, around our bodies, around everything. But a lot of the time we don't realize how impactful those imprints are on how we interact with the world. And then especially what we are then passing on to our children as we parent. So this book really is about helping people to explore some of the key core imprints that shape who we are and getting them to kind of unpack, that's actually one that really works for me. And this is one that actually drives me and isn't good. And I think through doing this work with thousands of parents, what I have seen the biggest shifts and changes happen for them is when they're able to identify what those imprints are and then work towards creating a new one. And that's when they begin to shift and change their lives.
I would imagine that that's not just for parenting purposes, like how you show up in your workplace with your relationships. I mean, relationships are hard.
Yeah, totally.
Especially there's this period of time now, again, children are, I find also these teen years are more demanding in terms of needing to be taken here, needing to be picked up here. Like it doesn't end. Yeah. It used to be easier to go away when I travel for work when they were little than what it is now because the demands, it's the coordination.
Logistics.
Anyway, I digress. But I feel like particularly for relationships and this point I'm reflecting because I've had these conversations with many girlfriends as of late, like when do we see each other anymore because we just haven't made time for that. Yeah. And it just falls by the wayside. And I feel like a lot of probably friendships do fall away at this point in time where there are a lot of things. There's often older parents, children, a job, a house, a marriage or a relationship of some description. The especially the female friendships or those special friendships do come secondary.
They often do. And I think that kind of speaks to the time we are in the world at the moment where we're very stressed, we're very busy. But it also for me speaks to what is the imprint that we are playing out around what we think a successful life is and what life actually should look like. So what's interesting and what I've seen, I guess, over these years of working with families is for many, many years we've been drummed into a success looks like achieving at school, getting very good grades, going to university, getting a really good job, making money, getting a great looking car, buying a house. You are successful, right? But we know people who have done that whose lives are a complete mess, right? there's disconnection, there's no intimacy, that kids don't like them. We know that material stuff is it doesn't equate to success anymore. I always come back to, I think what success is waking up with a calm nervous system in the morning. You wake up and you're like, oh, I feel pretty centered in my being. I think that is our measure of success now when we look at the amount of stress that we've got going on. But yet, what I have found that the imprints we receive from our family of origin are often sitting there in the back of our head going, no, you're not allowed to sit down because we don't sit down in this family. We just keep achieving. And so that's what drives us. And then women have a massive story around self-care, which you would, all about with your work, around the blocks that they have around taking care of themselves, around boundaries. And I think that's where friendship falls into that a lot as well, because we are so caught up in, this is what we're all doing and achieving on some level, that we are forgetting to come back to actually what is really important for me. What do I want now in my life? And this as we get older and as perimenopause and menopause hits, because it just is a leveler. It basically just helps you get rid of all the crap that you have been, living in, that it makes you really question what is important for me and what do I want? And yet again, I think that at the back of our heads, we often sometimes have these narratives and these stories that we don't often realize are there, that are still influencing the choices that we make. And I think what I really invite people to do is to stop and pause and go, what is my belief around this and where does that come from? And is that what I want actually moving forward?
Speaking of success, how important to you as a mother were your children's grades?
Zero. Zero, because all I was ever interested in with my children, and I've created a school, right? So, education's a thing.
Well, I think at this point.
But especially even building a school, what I began to realize is that is just such a tiny, small part of the bigger picture of being a human. And what I was always more interested in was my child a kind human? Were they looking out for other people? Were they standing up when there were injustices in the world? Were they passionate about learning? What lit them up? All the things that probably our mainstream education system doesn't really support. They're trying harder to. But for me, I cared less about grades. I'd never even look at them, because I would just be like, where are you and what lights you up? And a bit like you, when you think about the imprint, what I've wanted to model to my kids is you can do anything. Everything is possible for you. There is always a way. I never went to university. I don't have a degree, but I have had this amazing nearly 30-year career of following my passion and what I'm interested in to get to where I'm going. And so when we're talking about imprints, that's what my kids have watched, right? So all of them work for themselves or, have their own little side hustles they've got going on and are following what lights them up and what they're passionate about, because I'm like, this for me is what I want for you in your life. I want you to know that it's all possible there and that, you just have to get your mind to it, stick your mind to it, find people who've done it before, be willing to learn and give it a go, then, it all is possible for you.
I couldn't agree more. I am exactly the same with the kids. In fact, the kids came to me with this last round of reports and they're like, Mum, did you get the reports? I'm like, oh, yeah, probably somewhere. I don't know. What I want to see, and I know already, that your teachers love having you in the class. That I don't care about what the grades are. I go to that bit where it says, what the characteristics are, how well they contribute, all of that. That's what lights me up. I don't really care about the rest. But what's funny is, as we sat down just here and I read out a text to you that Olivia had sent me, Mum, I got an A in maths. And I actually say to them all the time, there is no pressure from me.
Yes.
At all. I just want you to be great people.
Yes.
Right.
But beautiful that there is still value in the fact that she's excited about that. Maybe she worked hard to get that. Yes. That's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Of course I wrote back, that's amazing. But it's really interesting that they will still text me their grades always.
Even though you're like, it's okay.
And we're at the point now also of figuring out what are we going to do in our life. What do you want to, I don't ever put any pressure on what do you want to be. They put so much pressure on themselves because everyone around them is asking the same questions and it's valid.
Yes.
But to your point, we're living at a different time. Not everyone's an accountant, a lawyer, a nurse or a doctor or a teacher. I would have loved to have been born at this point in time because I just chose something in the end.
Yes. I've said to my kids all the time, the 20s, you're kind of early adolescent, adulthood, teenage, even into those adult years are all about exploration. You know, so much of this is really about trying things, working in hospitality, you know, being in retail, doing a job and then going, yeah, that's not for me. I'm like, you're meant to figure out who you are. And this is your time to actually do it. Like, let's take all pressure off having to know, because really when we all reflect back, we spent most of our 20s wandering around going, oh, is that good? Yeah, is this good? Okay, that's all right. Or being in different relationships, you know, and I think that's a really important thing, because we have to live life to know what feels good for us, where we want to be within that.
Our 20s were like an out-of-body experience if you reflect back.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, what did you really know?
Yeah, nothing.
Not much.
Nothing.
Not much at all.
No, I had a child at 25 and I look back and just think I was a baby. Like, my son is the age now that I had him, and I look at him and think, I can't even imagine you as a parent.
I wasn't much old. I was 28, but even then when you say that now, people are like, you did what?
Yeah, yeah.
It was like, not that long ago. It's just what we did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, that was still pretty, I mean, that was young.
Yeah, that was younger, but definitely.
I look back and think there was a part of me that was ready for it. Like, I'm very happy that I did it at that time. It was hard. I mean, at any age, it's hard. But I think, you know, if I was to go back and look at my 20s again, I would just explore more. You know, I would take any pressure off having to know and just be like, what lights me up? What am I interested in? What can I give a go? Because all of that is so beautiful and rich for learning about who we are. Because, I mean, for me, and this is really, I guess, the essence of most of my work, I just want people to understand themselves better. When we know ourselves, when we are able to be aware of our feelings and emotions, when we are connected to what lights us up, when we are in that flow, we are much better humans. We are kind. We are compassionate. You know, we do better for the world. So I think the more that we know ourselves, you know, can see those blind spots, know that we need what we need to work with, I think the better off we're all going to be.
Many of us at a point in time have felt like we need to be fixed.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not about that at all. It's a gentle awareness.
Yeah.
And it's not fixing. It's once you've got that awareness, it might be some adjustments, some acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no one needs to be fixed.
No, I think that's a really beautiful point we've got there. Like, we are all just this beautiful, messy work in progress, right? And I don't think we ever get fixed. We are always growing and learning. I mean, parenting is a beautiful example of that. Like, even as your kids are older, they're still going to have stuff that goes on that's going to push your buttons. There's still going to be edges you're going to bump up against, because we're in relationship. I mean, relationship is where we learn, right? So whether it's our intimate partner, whether it's our kids, whether it's a colleague, our friends, you know, the invitation is to constantly be curious, to be like, what is my reaction here? What am I feeling in this moment? You know, what is surfacing for me and what's mine to own? And I think because most of us were raised in environments where we were taught to project onto others instead of owning our stuff, you know, we, as I think this generation, are still learning how to own our stuff. Whereas I think when we can raise kids with a level of consciousness, they are much better at being able to identify what's there for them and speaking their truth. I see what my kids come out with and I'm like, mate, there is no way I would have had even the awareness of having that at 20 as to what they have now, which I absolutely love, because we can see the consciousness that is growing. But I think we are still learning to own our feelings. You know, we are still learning to tune into our bodies, to not outsource our enoughness to everyone else. So, you know, I think we are all still in a big work in progress, which I think we will continue to be. Yet that is where power comes from in our lives, when we can own that.
I love that. Well, Own Your Story, by the time people are listening, will be available at all the places you buy books. We're not going to list them because there's just so many places you can do that nowadays. Yep. I'm sure if people search for you, they'll find that as well. Yep. So, Lael, thank you so very much for all the work that you do for all of us. It's such a delight to have sat here with you today. I could keep on talking.
Thank you, Nat. Thanks for having me.
No worries. And for those that are listening that have enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to go ahead and rate it for us. Leave us a little review. That makes me happy. And I will say until next time, bye for now.